Barbie in the real world. That's impossible.
In 4 months, Warner Brothers could lose the sequel to its most successful film ever. Barbie grossed $1.44 billion, and Margot Robbie earned more than $50 million as star and producer. Now, CEO David Zaslav has rejected 6 separate offers to the creative team. The studio has until December to reach a deal, or the rights revert to Mattel entirely. This isn't a pay dispute. It's a structural failure, born from a contract clause and a team that never signed sequel options. Barbie opened in July 2023 as a summer bet, not a sure thing. Every year, studios release dozens of films that cost hundreds of millions and vanish without a trace. But Barbie broke that pattern from day one. The film grossed $1.44 billion worldwide, overtaking Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 to become the highest-grossing release in Warner Brothers history. Margot Robbie starred in it and produced it through Lucky Chap, and her total payday topped $50 million once the box office bonuses rolled in. That payday ranked among the largest an actress had ever received for a single film. By every studio playbook, a follow-up should have been automatic. Warner Brothers had just landed the biggest hit in its 100-year history. The stars were willing to return, and Greta Gerwig already had an idea for the next chapter. She and Noah Baumbach waited for the studio to sign off before sharing a single page. But 3 years passed without a script, and the silence from the executive suites grew louder. The problem wasn't whether Barbie deserved a second film. The problem was whether Warner Brothers could afford to make it, and whether Zaslav would approve the check. Warner Brothers spent decades chasing a franchise on this scale. The Harry Potter series defined the studio for a generation. But that saga ended in 2011, and nothing since had matched it. Barbie arrived as a replacement, a new pillar that could anchor the slate for years. The studio marketed the film, released it, and watched it break records. They assumed the hard part was getting people into theaters, but they were wrong about what came next. What they discovered instead was that success carried a price they hadn't budgeted for. To understand why a $1.4 billion hit has no follow-up, look at the man who keeps saying no. David Zaslav took over Warner Brothers Discovery in 2022 with a mandate to cut costs. His strategy was simple: treat films as line items, not cultural assets. If a project looked risky, shelve it. And if it was finished, write it off for the tax benefit. The creative community watched in disbelief as one completed film after another vanished into accounting ledgers. The Batgirl cancellation emerged as the symbol of this era. The studio spent $90 million on a completed film, then shelved it permanently to take a tax write-off. The film got no theatrical release and no streaming drop. It simply ceased to exist. Zaslav later claimed it took courage to cancel completed movies. Coyote vs. Acme followed the same path. The $70 million hybrid was already finished when Zaslav's team killed it for another tax write-off. The director called the decision beyond devastating. Outside intervention years later rescued the film from oblivion. The pattern had one more twist. Alto Nights, the Robert De Niro mafia film that Zaslav personally championed, bombed at the box office. The CEO, who buried finished films to save money, had no problem greenlighting a disaster that lost millions. The pattern became impossible to miss. Zaslav would spend money to make a film disappear, but balked at paying the team behind his biggest hit. The irony grew almost too obvious to mention. This war between talent and studio is as old as the system itself. In 1943, Olivia de Havilland sued Warner Brothers over the 7-year contract rule, and her victory cracked the studio's monopoly. That single lawsuit changed how Hollywood did business for decades. But Zaslav is only half the story. The other half lives in a contract that Warner Brothers signed years ago. The Mattel deal contains a hard deadline. If Warner Brothers doesn't put a sequel into active development by December 2026, the film rights revert to the toy company entirely. That's a reversion clause, a common mechanism in toy-to-film licensing that becomes catastrophic when the studio has no leverage. Warner Brothers signed it years ago, long before Barbie became a phenomenon, and now the clock is running out. The studio assumed it would always control the timeline, but it doesn't. The hidden mechanism that makes this case unusual boils down to one fact. Warner Brothers never secured sequel options on Robbie, Gosling, Gerwig, or Baumbach. In a normal blockbuster cycle, the studio locks down talent for multiple films before the first one opens. Gerwig deliberately avoided being contractually tied to a follow-up, which means the studio is negotiating for a sequel to its biggest hit from a position of zero leverage. The creative team holds all the cards, and Warner Brothers is about to learn what that costs. The financial math is brutal. Based purely on upfront salaries and not including back-end participation, the cost to secure the core four exceeds $100 million. That covers only the talent. It doesn't include production costs, marketing, or profit sharing. Zaslav has reportedly called the profit-sharing deal too generous. Variety confirmed that the team accepted their upfront salaries, but remains unsatisfied with the back-end structure. The dispute isn't about greed. It's about who controls the money after the box office returns come in. In Hollywood, the fight over back-end participation has destroyed more partnerships than any creative disagreement, and Barbie is the latest casualty. The ticking clock makes every negotiation harder, and 6 offers have hit the table, with 6 coming back rejected. With 4 months until December, Warner Brothers isn't just bargaining against Gerwig and her stars, it's bargaining against its own contract. The clause that once looked like standard legal language has become the mechanism that could cost Warner Brothers its most valuable franchise. No one at the studio expected to face this deadline without a script or a signed deal. If December arrives with no agreement, Mattel walks away with the brand. This isn't the first time a studio made billions and then fought the people who made it possible. Peter Jackson's lawsuit against New Line Cinema over Lord of the Rings profits offers a near-perfect parallel. Jackson delivered a culture-defining trilogy that grossed nearly $3 billion, then discovered New Line had shortchanged him through Hollywood accounting. He sued for his back-end share, and the settlement only came after years of litigation. The irony was that New Line never saw a dime of the money it tried to hide, and the lawsuit cost them their most valuable director. The structural match is unmistakable, because the core issue involves a back-end participation dispute rather than upfront salary demands. Variety reported that the Barbie team faces the same dynamic. They've accepted their upfront pay, but remain unsatisfied with how the profits get divided once the box office numbers roll in. The studio made billions, and the talent wants to know where the money went. It's the oldest story in Hollywood, and it's repeating with higher stakes. The difference comes down to leverage. Jackson eventually settled and returned for The Hobbit because New Line still held the rights. The Barbie team may walk entirely because the reversion clause hands Mattel the power to decide what happens next. In this case, the studio can't simply wait out the talent. The deadline decides for them, and the clock is still ticking. Which brings us to the question no one at Warner Brothers wants to answer out loud. If December passes with no deal, Mattel regains the film rights. But there's a second hidden mechanism. Mattel can't use a single frame of Gerwig's film. The reversion clause gives the toy company the brand, but Gerwig's screenplay, her visual language, the performances, and the tone all stay with Warner Brothers or the creators themselves. Mattel would face a full reboot, and any new studio partner would start from zero. The highest-grossing film in Warner Brothers history could become a memory that no one at the studio is allowed to touch. There would be no Robbie, no Gosling, no Gerwig, and no Baumbach. The studio would have to build a new Barbie from scratch, competing with the memory of a $1.4 billion phenomenon. That ranks as the highest stakes consequence of a clause almost no one is talking about. The fans would notice the difference immediately. The critics would compare every frame to Gerwig's original, and the box office would punish the imitation. A reboot without the creative team would cost almost as much and earn a fraction of the return. It would be corporate malpractice dressed up as a business decision. The paradox now stands complete. Warner Brothers made the biggest film in its history, and its own contracts may force it to watch another studio try to replicate what it threw away. Zaslav's rap sheet tells the whole story. Look at Batgirl and Coyote vs. Acme and Alto Knights. He remains a CEO who destroys value and then wonders why his studio has no franchises left. The sequel Meltdown isn't an accident. It's the predictable result of a mindset that treats films as tax write-offs instead of cultural assets. That's what happens when the spreadsheet wins and the artists walk away. The studio that invented the modern blockbuster may have perfected its own obsolescence. The contracts that built Hollywood are now the weapons that dismantle it. And the Barbie standoff is only the latest battlefield where the spreadsheet won. Subscribe for more untold stories from the archive.